My name is Frank Griff and I co-founded a business and sold it for $180 million. In this video, I'm going to take you through my exact B2B sales strategy and everything I learned across those 7 years. Let's talk about the context. Like, what are you going to see in this video? What we're going to start off with is the thing I call the influencer strategy. We're going to move forward to inbound and outbound leads. Next, we're going to talk about the demo. What is it that actually encompasses a demo and like what are the important steps? We'll then talk about the close and finally the follow-up. Now, it's really important to understand this for me is a collection of learnings from different places. And one of the key things I learned is I read a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. And I learned about these different psychological principles, which you're going to start to learn throughout. But the first thing for me is I came up with a strategy called the influencer strategy. The beautiful part about B2B sales is it's not just every customer is equal. Some customers people care about, and if you get that one, the golden goose, the other 10 will follow. And other customers, well, often you can actually lose influence over choosing those wrong customers. There's a thing called the yo-yo effect. And this matters really importantly when you're starting a business. So the yo-yo effect is at a high school, depending on which kid brought the yo-yo, it either became an epidemic and soon they had to ban yo-yos, or it fizzled out and no one brought yo-yos. And it depended if it was the cool kid or if it was the geek. And so when it comes to business, like you want to target like who are those cool kids who are using your product and create that yo-yo effect. So how you think about the influencer strategies, what you want to do is map out all of your potential customers. And as I kind of take you through this, I'm going to share some lived experience of how I did it. What I had on the back of my wall of the office is I had all the customers' logos, and depending on their influence was the size of the logo. And for me, influence came in a few different forms. So number one is like their brand positioning. If you were to use their logo on your website, would it make an impact, or is it one that you wouldn't want to show? Think about this almost like a game of snakes and ladders. When you get the right customer, you climb a ladder and you get a few steps ahead. When you get a wrong one, it's a snake and it'll send you back. So what we want to do is spend this is brought to you by Hira, I'm an investor. Cheers, Steve. So what you want to do is you want to focus more of your time on these influencers. If you can get one of them, you have a roll-on effect of getting so many more customers. And so really all of your kind of effort and attention should be identifying who is the next influencer along the line that you can get and spill over to more. So let's talk about inbound and outbound leads. Now, so many people, especially in today's day, are so afraid of making cold calls. And the beautiful part about that is use that as your advantage. When people are afraid to do it, you should be looking to do it. And a cold call at first can seem really scary, but like transparently in my days, like I wouldn't make any more than like 10 cold calls in a day. And for a lot of companies, that's a very low number. But the reason was my cold calls were very strategic. I made sure I was only calling the ones I really wanted to close. And again, I spent so much time researching that specific type of customer. The cool thing about people being in public, so whether it be websites, whether it be content, is you can actually learn about your customer before you make that cold call. So let me share you a story. There was a customer who was in a different state that was a very influential customer. If I knew I could get them, it would mean I would unlock a whole series of customers around them. And so what I started to do is I started to listen to podcast content, and one day I got this little nugget of gold. And in this podcast, he said, I never make cold calls, I only FaceTime. And so on my first cold call to this customer, instead of calling him normally, I actually FaceTimed him. And immediately he answered, because who the fuck would FaceTime you as a cold call? It's weird. Within like 5 minutes, he's like, bro, like I feel like we're spirit animals. Like, do you also love FaceTiming? And so just that one little piece of extra research changed the whole dynamic of that call. So figure out like what can you learn about your customer and then how can you use it to your advantage? When it comes to inbound leads, of course, these are the things that are magic to your business. So whether it be you're doing marketing or whatever inside your business, and you start getting inbound requests, there's one key principle you want to think about, and that's the speed in which you actually call that person. So many people will have inbound leads come, realizing in the moment they're having that, in the moment they're on your website and they're thinking, okay, I'm gonna hit the type form and see if someone will call me. You have their brain space in that exact moment. So don't wait 24 hours to get back to them, 36 hours, whatever amount of time. There was a Harvard business study done, which was if you can call that customer back within 5 minutes of them hitting your website, it will disproportionately, I think it was a couple hundred percentage points, help you actually close that customer. So we made it like a game in our business. What we did is we set up a Slack channel, which was on my phone. And so the moment an inbound lead came, I got a notification. And so my game was, can I call them while they're still on the website? Because if I pick up their phone and say, hey Steve, I'm just giving you a call, I noticed you're on our website and you wanted some help, how can I help you today? It completely changes the conversation, because in that moment, Steve's like, you're a freak because how did you contact me so quickly? But it instantly builds rapport and remembering you're in their brain space in that moment. So capture that. The last thing about a cold call or an inbound lead, however that conversation goes, is the job is to ask questions. So a lot of people will go directly into sales mode. Here's our product, here's our feature, blah, 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 blah. None of that matters because realizing your business, you have many different functions, features, tools, whatever they are. What matters is what is important to that customer. So your job is to find out that on that call, asking a series of standardized questions. Now, these are the things that go into your CRM. Now, for us, those questions were who are the suppliers that you normally use? What's the reason you're calling today? Is there any kind of particular challenges you have in your business? And so I'm trying to create this idea of context around that customer. And these are different signals that are going to help me understand, is this a cold lead or is this a red hot one? And that will change how I go about the process. But the reason we want to ask these questions is because they will lead us into the demo. The demo. Here's one of the things that pisses me off about salespeople. Salespeople will have this predefined structure on how they do a demo. So if anybody's gone and purchased a car or a used car, and you're hey, I want to know the price of this Mercedes or Toyota Yaris or whatever. And they say to you, whoa, slow down, bucko. We'll get to that. Let's first talk about, the features and blah, 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 blah. And the problem is the customer has a series of things that they actually want to understand. And by trying to have this rigid approach to your demo or to your sales approach, it kind of gives people the ick. So what you have to understand is your demo needs to be fluid to that particular customer. And so I'm going to work you through the exact structure I took myself and kind of taught myself, but then actually taught the rest of my sales team. My first principle is this. Slide decks are shit. Slide decks are shit. And the problem is if I'm selling tech, I'm selling a solution to a customer. If I'm showing them through a slide deck, now don't fucking laugh at me, obviously I'm showing you a slide deck today, it's kind of counterintuitive, right? And so what I need to do is I need to instead show them the product itself, talk through my demo as I'm showing them the product. Here's the structure. Number one is context. I like to say context is king. Context is important because let's say you have a 30-minute demo with a customer. You understand all of the context of your business. They know almost nothing. And so when you're starting this conversation, the problem is they have these preconceived ideas as well as questions and they're running through their head. And if you don't frame up context, i.e. what are we going to be talking about today? How long is it going to take? When should they ask questions? If you don't frame that up, what's going to happen is they're going to start thinking about those questions in their mind subconsciously. And if they're not thinking about, when is this person going to tell me about price, the problem is they're not actually paying attention to you. So the context is absolutely critical. Let me just hit you with exactly how I would say it. So Steve, we chatted on the phone. On our conversation, we talked about kind of your 3 challenges you're having in your business. And today is around operational efficiencies, churn of your staff, and finally, you're not super happy with the tech you're using today. What I'm going to be talking about over the next 30 minutes, noticing I'm putting a timestamp, is I'm going to be running through kind of the 3 core features of our business. We're then going to run through, as we go along, if you have any questions, just hit me with the questions straight away. From that, we're then going to talk about the pricing, and finally, we're going to talk about the next steps. Does that work with you, Steve? And so immediately, I've kind of wrapped this conversation in a bow, and so Steve doesn't think are we ever going to talk about pricing? How long is it going to be? He knows where we are, and so now I have his attention, and that is the key. Next, I want to talk about our 3 pain points. There's a principle, and it's the rule of 3s. There's a reason when you look at a mobile number and people show a mobile number on a business card, they break it up into 3 sections. It's easier for our brain to retain. So if you have the 3 core pain points that you're going to be talking to, that's far better than having 55 features that they're going to forget all of it. The way I like to think about this is everybody's busy and they have a finite amount of time and brain space. So focus on the 3 biggest things that are going to make an impact. And the way I want you to think about it is if they leave and have to go tell a direct report, a manager, a decision maker, what are the 3 things you want them to remember rather than all the noise? What you're looking for when it comes to the pain points is what are the aha moments? So what are those moments that light the customer up? And you can tell that by the changes in body language, their inflection, their tone of voice. Those are the things you want to focus on. And remembering, in your cold call or in your inbound call, you ask questions, which are their pain points in business. You want to focus your demo on that because you're trying to solve their problems. We then go to this concept called social proof. Now, social proof, if you remember, I talked about that book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. Social proof, really simple concept. Back in cave people days, someone ate a berry, another person saw them, that person didn't die, fantastic, I can eat a berry. It is hardwired into us as humans to see someone else do something and be more likely to do it ourselves. So throughout your conversation, your demo, rather than just selling features and widgets, you want to tell a story and you want to do it through the lens of social proof. I'll give you a lived example. Every time we made a change to our online platform, we kind of note in my mind who asked for that change, and especially if it was one of these customers of influence. So as I was working through the system and I was talking about one of these pain points, I would be like, you'll notice this feature here. We actually got asked by customer X to deliver that feature because they were having these challenges in their business. Once we did that, it made a huge shift and they were actually able to get like way more output out of the customers. So I could have just talked about the feature, click these buttons, click that button, but instead I curated a story based in truth, the truth is important, that was wrapped up in social proof and then delivered back to them. And so these are like strategic ways to weave in these psychological principles throughout your demo that doesn't feel contrived. Often people will have in a slide deck, here are our 10 customers we work with, and they'll show a logo. And like, that's cool, but it's obvious. So instead of having something that's so freaking obvious, what you want to do is have these stories to tell, wrap up the social proof, and piece them through your demo. Next, I want to talk about something that's absolutely critical when it comes to a demo, and that is questions. There was another study done, which is at the end of a meeting, people were asked to rate how good was that meeting from a scale of 1 to 10. What they found from the study was people who spoke more would disproportionately rate the meeting higher. And essentially what it is humans love themselves, everybody's a hero in their own story, and so they want to feel seen and heard. And so if you have a demo where you are rattling off features and blah, 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 like I am to you today, across 30 minutes and the customer has no time to talk, they will likely say, yeah, it was all right. Instead, what you want to do is utilizing your questions, have this opportunity for a kind of back and forth conversation. Questions which often people ask are closed-ended questions. So they'll say something like, hey Steve, does this make sense? The problem is people don't want to sound silly and they also don't want to let you down. So they'll of course answer, yes, that makes perfect sense. And so you've achieved none of the goals here. You haven't got them talking, you haven't been able to make sure that they're actually paying attention. What you want to do instead is ask questions that are open-ended that will get a conversation flowing. As I start to work through my demo, I will say to the customer at the end of a particular feature, from what I've shown you about that feature, how do you think you'll implement that in your business? And that open-ended question gets them kind of talking. It also gets me to be able to assess, like, are they understanding what I'm saying or they're missing something? Another type of question is a soft closing question. Now, I haven't been soft in years. People will kind of run away from an objection because objections feel scary, or they'll wait till an objection comes at the very end. What I want to do is run towards it. So as I'm flowing through my demo, I will ask a series of questions that will look for an objection from the customer. Here's an example. Steve, from what I've shown you so far of the system, what do you think's not going to work for your business? This is a very open-ended question, but it'll also give Steve that opportunity to kind of share, and I will be able to identify, is it something that we are missing, or is it maybe something I have not communicated? And that's the key to be able to ask a question like that. Another way of doing a soft closing question would be, from what I've shown you so far, what do you think will make the biggest impact in your business? And the reason for that one is, like, I'm kind of getting them to sell themselves. So by the end of this conversation, if I have a series of these types of questions, like, they're at this heightened state of like kind of compressing the memories into their mind and really selling how excited they are to be on the platform. As we start to near towards the end of the demo, the final objection question you want to ask is, from everything I've shown you today, what's the thing that would hold you back from working with us and why? And by doing this, what we're going to actually be able to do is like uncover, is there something I've missed in my conversation, or is there something I can now kind of handle through that process? There's a reason we're having this conversation. Business runs on cash money. You want to get to the close, and that's what we're going to talk about next. Every demo, what we need to do is we need to assess, like, how close are we getting this customer to being able to close and become a potential customer and send us cash. We want to find out, like, through a series of questions, where are they up into the cycle? And so there's two questions I love to ask. Number one, from everything we've discussed today, is there anybody else in your business that would need to be part of the decision-making process, or are you able to do that yourself? Now for this, I'm trying to find out like how close in the chain am I up to, or I'm at that last final decision maker and we're good to go. The next question, one of my favorites. When you're talking about closing, what happens is like there are a few different variables in front of you. So it might be pricing, it might be timing. And what I want to do is I kind of want to like play in a hypothetical land to get a sense of how close am I. And so what I say to them is, provided we get the commercials right, how quickly would you want to move forward with us? And so it's kind of like taking the commercials, putting them overside. They're like, oh, who cares about pricing? Like, let's talk about this. Because if they say to me like, as quickly as you can, or next week, or look, Frank, you know, probably a year from now, what that's going to help me understand is like, if they say next week, well, I probably have a better negotiation standpoint when it comes to pricing. If they say next year, I understand that this is not a highest priority for them and I'm gonna need to work a lot harder for this. Every conversation, every demo, you need to have what is the next logical step that you're gonna have and something that you've committed in the diary. That might be as simple as a follow-up phone call from all the information you're gonna share with them. That might be another demo with an influencer in their business. Whatever it is, you need to have it locked in. So towards the end of the discussion, it's really critical, like what is that next step for you and what is the next step for their business? And you might simply ask them. From everything we had today, I'm sure you're gonna need a moment to digest. Would a good time to call be on Monday at 2 p.m. and you allow for their agreement? And finally, here's the thing that I think a lot of people lose up on, and that is follow-up. The game of B2B sales is won through consistency and persistency. One of my deals that I put together towards the final years of our business took 3 years, 23 flights, but ended up being an $850,000 recurring revenue deal. And so had I lost kind of like motivation to follow up, it would have been hundreds of follow-up calls. I would have never got the customer. The beautiful part is when you're working with the influential customer and you know they're gonna be a big contract size, you have that time and you can put in a crazy amount of energy because once you have them, they can be very sticky. You wanna have a follow-up strategy, whether it's in your CRM. Now, obviously, if this is a 3-year thing, you're probably not calling them every week, but like what are those different touch points? And the first follow-up is gonna be, you know, after that demo, and it's gonna be making sure you're like, hey, I just wanna share with you all the information. What I love to do is text. Texting creates like a different type of dynamic in a relationship. Everything when it's all formal in an email really changes when it's in a text. It becomes almost like a friendship relationship. It is better to build rapport. But beyond that, it's like, what are those logical touch points? Now, I've done some weird stuff in my days. Like the reality is you kind of have to get creative. And so whether it be, I knew a prospect had a similar car to me, and one day I got a new car and I'm sending them a text. Actually, that was an Instagram. I sent them an Instagram saying, oh, a bit sad. I've left the same car club as yours. Here's, I got my new one, and I'm sending it to them in the car showroom. That was actually the final message that got me to close the deal. So you get a little bit creative because you're trying to build rapport. Why is it important? Because at some stage, they might be thinking about shifting, and are you the most recent person that has hit their mind? And so over the last 20 minutes, we've gone through literally the exact sales process. None of this is like Frank IP, but it's a collection of learnings I've had from different books, insights, and lessons learned over about 7 years. I've taken this blueprint, I've applied it across many of my team before. This is something that doesn't have to be tech B2B sales. It can be many different types. It's really a B2B sales strategy. And thank you for watching me sip this delicious hydration beverage.